Testing.
It's a project that the museum has sort of commissioned.
Well, congratulations. You'll be immersed in wonderful things. That's beautiful.
That is nice. It's very inspiring
Yeah.
to study or to read more about the process.
And I think if you're going to people like know this one image, but they don't know this story or how wide ranging it is. Yeah, it's just great. Yeah. Heather, you're doing a project. I have this.
Yeah.
I'll make sure I see it.
If you're here tomorrow, yeah, we have the premiere tomorrow.
Well, we have a lot of things happening tomorrow, but what time is it?
I think it's evening for us.
Evening. Okay, so let me.
If you can catch it,
I'd love to. It'd be great.
because maybe Q&A will be there
Wow.
for the Q&A tomorrow.
Tomorrow's Monday.
Just see if
Let me talk to the people on Monday. See if I can. That'd be great. Let's rock.
Good evening. Welcome. Welcome to the 50th New York Film Festival. Seated in front of us, a selection of filmmakers who are here with the festival, are here at the festival. And I'll let Dana do the introductions. I just want to thank Dana Harris from IndieWire, our moderator, and thank everyone for being here. So without further ado, Dana Harris. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, and you'll have to pardon my notes, but it's just like this is a long and impressive line of filmmakers here, and there's no way in the world it's going to be able to memorize all of your names. So we're going to start off one by one, introducing the filmmakers and their films, and then I'm going to start going down the line and asking you to start telling us a little bit about the films themselves. Okay. Dheeraj Alkokar.
Yep.
And your film is?
It's Liv and Ingmar, and it is based on the relationship between Liv Ullmann and Ingmar Bergman.
Okay.
42 years and 12 films.
Alan Berliner.
Yes, my film is called First Cousin Once Removed. And it's a portrait of my cousin, friend, former cousin, friend, and mentor, the late Edwin Honig, poet, translator, critic, teacher, and his final years losing his memory through because of Alzheimer's disease.
Philippe Béziat.
My film is called Becoming Traviata. I'm French from Paris, and it's about rehearsals of Traviata with Nathalie Dessay in Aix-en-Provence last year.
Okay. Tom Donahue.
My film is a documentary called Casting By, and it focuses on the kind of the formation of the profession of casting director, focusing on one pioneer in particular named Marion Doherty.
Mick Guchner.
Hi. My film is The Rolling Stones, Charlie is My Darling, 1965. It's a film based on the tour that they did of that year in Ireland.
Jeff Kaufman.
My film is The Savoy King, Chick Webb, and the Music That Changed America. It's about drummer Chick Webb, who was a hunchback dwarf with spinal tuberculosis, who discovered Ella Fitzgerald. And it's also about Harlem Savoy Ballroom, which is the first place in America where whites and blacks could dance together.
Excellent. And Antonio Mendez Esparza.
Hi. The film is about a man that returns to his hometown in Mexico, to a small village, after working for a few years in the U.S. So it tells the story of his coming back and what he finds and what he expects and what he can achieve.
So obviously we have a deeply eclectic lineup here. And but the thing that I think all of these films and probably all the films in the festival have in common in terms of is like there's always like a very deep passion that informs making these films. And I was going to start from the opposite end with Mick with Charlie Is My Darling. That film has got a very strange backstory in terms of, I mean, yes, on the one hand, it's a concert film and it's showing them on their 65 tour in Ireland. But can you tell us a little bit about like how this actually, it's actually being able to be seen finally at the New York Film Festival?
Well, it started off as a sort of a test run. Andrew Oldham, who was their manager at the time, had been influenced by all the things that were going on, like the Beatles in A Hard Day's Night. So he hired a documentary filmmaker to go with them on this 2-day tour that they were doing of Ireland. They shot, they shot a lot of talking head material. They got it back to England. And he put together a short film when he got back that was about 35 minutes long, but it was shelved. About a year and a half ago, I was researching stuff into the 50th anniversary of the Stones, which we're at right now, and discovered that he had also shot about them performing, but it was in unmarked cans, unprocessed, and stuck away in the vaults. So we spent about a year putting that together and then incorporating that into some of the things that were in the original Charlie Is My Darling.
Why was the original shelved?
Well, it wasn't planned to be a film in the first place. And then after they got back to from this tour, they went straight away to the United States and started recording another album. And their concentration became live performance and studio work. So it just wasn't of interest to them. It's not the only time that's happened. It happened with Rock and Roll Circus as well, where they had grandiose plans and then just put them away because it didn't fit in with what they were doing.
Didn't that also kind of happen with performance as well? I mean, wasn't there a...
Performance came out. That was mixed acting, debut, pretty much. So that made it out.
And Alan, what about your film? What inspired, I mean, this obviously is a very personal story for you. How did this come to be?
Well, it's actually the third portrait that I've made about a sort of an elder male relative. I made a film about my grandfather. I made a film about my father. I guess now I'm doing the cousin. And but all my films, in a way, have been about a lot of things. But there's always this issue of personal memory in the air. In the case of my grandfather, he was no longer alive. I made the film 16 years after his death. He wasn't alive to remember. In the case of my father, who was a very reluctant and resistant subject, he was indeed alive, but he didn't want to remember, or could care less about remembering. This film, in a way, goes much closer to the heart of memory, I mean personal memory, and the way it forms and functions and creates identity, because my cousin Edwin can't remember. And so it's an exploration not only of his life, but it's really about how the power of memory in all of our lives, because there are things that he doesn't remember that are both very important and very meaningful and very wonderful, but there are also things that he doesn't remember about his life that are very powerfully sad and tragic. And so there's a part of his memory loss that's actually merciful, you know. So I like to think the film is a meditation on memory and, you know, on the fragility of growing old and aging and mortality, and that's my film.
Did you mean to create this sort of triptych of family members? I mean, was that a long-term vision? Or?
No, I mean, I've been making films that are sort of personal, and but it's just sort of not coincidence, but I just put it all together recently that I went from grandfather to father to cousin. It's not a purposeful thing, and it's not a premeditated nor a planned thing. No. But I tend to stay close to home, one way or the other. I mean, my son is in this film as well, and my father has a cameo in the film as well. My father actually lost his memory in his final years as well. So the subject of memory loss and how to cope with it and deal with it is something I've had experience with personally as well.
Philippe, want to talk a little bit like how you came to your story, why this story was so important to you?
I first apologize for my English. It's not very accurate. I'm used to film music from a long time, and this film, Becoming Traviata, is the third film I make about music and opera. And first one was about Péléas et Mélisande by Debussy, and the second one is about a piece of Stravinsky which is called Noces, Weddings, and this one is about Traviata. So my personal subject is music, and I'm for now, and I'm love to watch and film musicians when they work, when they look for their way in their job, in a piece as difficult and as beautiful like as Traviata, for example. And for this film, it depends of people you meet and who are okay for doing the film, because they have to be with us for long weeks, working in front of the camera. And last year at the Aix-en-Provence Festival, we had the opportunity and the authorization. They granted us to be from the very beginning of the rehearsals till the first performance, 2 months, and we could share with them all the rehearsals. And there is two persons very important in the film: director, French director, which is called Jean-François Sivadier, which has a very lively way of directing singers like actors proper, and Nathalie Dessay. Maybe some people here know her because she's at the Met from time to time. She sings in New York. That's and the story of the film is this encounter between her and him in the work.
And Antonio?
Well, for me, it was a movie about a film I didn't know or didn't share too much. So I think many times I think, why did I make this film? There was a lot of ambition, perhaps on me, making a film, and I think the desire to know more about the film, the world I wanted to portray, made it for me a journey, Perhaps that desire of trying to understand better home for the character in the film that is an immigrant. And then afterwards I started, but much afterward, when I think while shooting and while editing, I started to see, to understand, perhaps, not even to understand why I made the film, but more things that I share in common with the characters or with the story the film tells. So for me it was a very, well, I don't know if always, because it's only my first film, but it all starts with some sort of desire to understand or to know more about something, and then I try to dig into it.
Tell us about Liv and Ullmann.
Oh well, Liv and Ingmar started really in 2006 when I read a book, Liv Ullmann's Changing, and it was really inspiring and it was wonderful. But in 2007, Ingmar Bergman passed away, and I was in London and in the English press really looking for some comment from Liv, some sort of an interview or something, and there was nothing, really. And I stopped looking because there would be nothing in a way. And this is when just the film came to me, and wrote something down, and sent a letter to her. And she replied. She rang back and said, "I will do an interview and nothing else." And then it took 2.5 years to to find the money, and went to Sweden, wrote to 60 producers, and nobody wanted to do it. Yes, met many of them, and they said there's too much Bergman in the market, and I didn't understand what that meant. And I feel really thankful that all 60 of them refused, because that really led me to Rune Tronsen, who's there in the audience, and Nordic Stories, a company in Oslo. And they said, yes, we want to do it, and it was very no-nonsense. We need to get Liv's consent. I said yes, of course. And so the senior partner in the company, Stein Roger Bull, he knows Liv. So he rang her, and he said, there's an Indian filmmaker who lives in London, and he's saying that he wants to make a film on you. Would you do it? She said no. So I kind of sank, you know. And then they requested her that the director's down here in Oslo, come and meet him. And she said, yes, I'm going to go and meet him, but you tell him that I'm not going to do the film. And I'm very happy they didn't tell me that, because because then we met, and she asked me something. She said, why do you want to do this film? And I started telling her, and 5 minutes into the discussion, her eyes just filled up. She held my hand and said yes. Yeah. And then it just started.
And Jeff, tell us about Chick Webb.
Sure. The Savoy King is about a number of forces coming together. Chick Webb he's been described as the Louis Armstrong of drums. The first person to make drums a really modern instrument. He was a genius. But he was also a hunchback dwarf with spinal tuberculosis. People would laugh at him when he would try to audition in the late 1920s. He came to New York. Duke Ellington mentored him. And the film, I think, weaves a lot of different things I care about. Community, social responsibility, connection between history, so that we have a sense of where we've come from and where we're going. And I had no idea what the discoveries would be when we worked on the film, but we were able to make a lot of archival discoveries, but also film almost entirely with people who knew Chick and Ella in the 1920s and the 1930s. Women who actually were there and booed Ella Fitzgerald during her debut performance at the Apollo. People who saw Chick pass out on stage and bleed after a performance. You know, it was really a privilege to connect with these amazing people who could warrant their own documentary. So Chick was mentored by Duke Ellington, and against a lot of hard knocks, including having a black band in a world that was run by white bands, he really broke through on so many different levels. The first thing I found out about Chick was because he beat Benny Goodman in a Battle of the Bands in 1938 at the Savoy Ballroom. 5,000 people inside, 5,000 people outside. Ellington had become world famous by adopting a lot of Chick's songs that Chick did for a black audience and bring them to a white audience. And Chick just mopped the floor with him. So that was just a phenomenal moment, and building out from that we found out much more. Chick discovered Ella Fitzgerald, but also he helped kick off Afro-Cuban music by mentoring Mario Baza and by mentoring Dizzy Gillespie. He had a piece in rhythm and blues because Louis Jordan played for his band. And Chick was also just phenomenal in the way he broke through other barriers too. If you walk down the street and see the Park Central Hotel, that was like every other hotel in New York that was close to black bands. Chick's band was the first black band to play at that hotel, and it's still there now. They played, if you go to the Hard Rock Cafe in Times Square, that was the Paramount Theater, and Chick broke all records when he played there. So he was the first black band to have a national radio show, and was really key to kicking down so many doors and changing so many lives. And the Savoy was the first venue in America where whites and blacks could really dance together on the dance floor. Every place else in Harlem was segregated, and Chick was the house band there. So it was a sense of community and music, dance, and sort of a vision ended up really changing a piece of our culture, and that changed a piece of everyone inside. So that's what the film is about.
Tell us about Casting By.
Casting By came to me. It was the end of 2006, and I was having coffee with a friend in LA who was a casting director, and she said, "Hey, there's this project. There's something we could possibly work on together." And I was like, "Cool. What is it?" And she said, "There's this casting director named Marion Doherty. Have you ever heard of her?" And I felt like an idiot. I'm like, "No, I've never heard of her." She's like, "Well, I have another casting director. We're thinking she'd be an amazing documentary, and we'd love for you to put her on tape to do an interview with her." And I said I would go back to New York, I would Google her, and I would learn more about her and see if it's something I'd be interested in. And so I went all over the internet looking for information on Marion Doherty, and I I found an article written by a student, an interview with her from the University of Oklahoma, and it was like 3 pages long, and it opened up this world for me of this woman's legend over 50 years and everything she had accomplished in 50 years. And there was only one article about her. So I knew that a movie had to be made about this woman. and then I interviewed Marion in the middle of 2007. It was about a 12-hour interview. And my jaw dropped with every story and every relationship and every actor this woman had ever supported, and how everything she was about, every movie she had worked on, were movies that informed in my life as a child and into adulthood. And really, some of those movies had changed my life, you know. And I realized in starting to do interviews, I interviewed John Voight, Diane Lane, Glenn Close, and then some other casting directors. So I was at about 50 casting directors when I said, oh, I want to interview Lynn Stallmaster. I've seen him on every movie in the 70s, every movie I grew up with. So I brought Lynn in for what was supposed to be a 20-minute interview and spent 2 hours. I spent ultimately probably 20 hours talking to Lynn as well. And I realized after 240 interviews that I had a documentary about casting in Hollywood over the last 50 years. And I knew, though, that ultimately the soul of the story was Marion's journey, but that her journey kind of represented the profession from its beginnings, really out of live television, and the destruction or the decline of the studio system in the 50s and 60s to really what it is today. And most major casting directors today can trace their lineage back to a handful of pioneering casting directors like Lynn and Marion. So I hope that makes sense.
Oh, it definitely makes sense. I mean, all of these films, I mean, are in some way personal and, obviously deeply difficult to get done. I mean, it's like, don't try this at home, folks. But the thing I'm kind of curious about is, and I want to throw this out to everybody, what element of making your film do you feel like changed you most? And like in terms of what challenge did it bring up that you're like, well, I didn't expect that one. What was that for you?
Well, we shot the film with Liv in the house that Ingmar Bergman built for her, where he declared his love for her. And I grew up in India, in the tropics, and in the heart of Bollywood. And to go to a place that you have seen in countless classical films, and to enter this house that is so alive, really, with his energy still, you cannot believe. And then opens the door and Liv walks in. It's like a scene from a film. And you think you can handle it, but you cannot. I really thought I could handle it, And it just, she's 73, but she's luminous. She's extraordinary, free spirit. And you fall in love, but you don't understand how you cannot say that, and and then who am I, and all those sort of things. And but then we started shooting, and after the first segment of interview, I had to, in the break, go and tell her. I said, this is difficult for me. If I'm messing up, please bear with me. And she opened up, and from that moment, it started. But till then, it was challenging. It was overwhelming, and learning as well. But yeah.
I'm going to pick on you. What about you, Jeff?
Sure. I think I learned two things. One, like you, and I'm sure like everyone else here, it was a very long journey with a lot of fear and disappointment along the way, and then all of a sudden being blessed by someone who reached out and helped you. So I learned, A, to try to repay that whoever asked me in the future, and B, there's a fine line between having a vision and being nuts, and you have to hope that you're on the right line. But the other thing I learned is we were able to connect with these amazing people from the 1920s and 30s, a reverend, a playwright, a great basketball player, great jazz figures, wonderful dancers, a pioneer of medicine in Harlem, all who were very vibrant people in the 1930s. And when I interviewed them in their 90s, just a few years ago, they were still as connected to life and what was important as any lively 20-year-old you could meet. And I just realized that, damn, I want to try to have that spark in me, not just 4 decades from now. I'd like to have it tomorrow. So, that was very inspiring. I'll never forget that.
Alan?
Yeah, I was going to say, I chronicled my cousin Edwin's the last 5 years of his life, and I watched him grow old. I watched him grow incredibly frail. I watched a wordsmith lose his command of language, but I also saw like this incredible spirit stay all through. I saw that he still, despite losing his memory and losing his health and losing his relationship to his past and language, he was still a poet up until, in many ways, the last days of his life. And every time I visited him, he was like a different person. You know, it was like my film has my visits with him are intercut rather cubistically, and it's almost as if it's a different person. He has a different personality, a different way of speaking, a different relationship to words and to inflection, and you know, I'll leave you. And he would say amazing things from his unconscious that you can't even make up. I mean, one day he played with my son in the morning with musical instruments. That was the language that they could speak together. And I brought a maraca that they had played in the morning later that evening. And I showed him the maraca and I said, Edwin, do you remember playing with this earlier today? And he looked at the maraca and he said, I have no night of what I knew in the morning. You know? And he would say things like that all the time. Anyway, this cousin Edwin, you know.
Actually, I'm going to ask one more question, Reese. Was it more because do you find, I mean, it sounds to me, you know, incredibly daunting to be able to make a film about, you know, about family members, much less about, you know, going through this very difficult and sensitive time. I mean, has it got, you know, the fact that you've made, this is your third film kind of in this framework, has it gotten any easier?
Well, I've actually made more difficult films about myself. So I've gone further. I made a film about my name. I made a film about my insomnia. I mean, I've been going, actually, this film is a sort of, up to this film, the direction.
When you're making films about yourself, you know you have your own permission, and you know.
Yeah. But I mean, the body of my work is almost like a zoom in, and this film is like a pullback, because I'm actually, you know, back to making a film about someone else. But obviously, the title of the film, First Cousin Once Removed, does tell you about my relationship with him. He is family, and we have things in common. And I try to share things about who he was and what I know about our family, and to try to, you know, bring him back a little bit, or give him, if it's even remotely possible, an inkling, a moment, a flash of connection with who he once was. You know, each film is its own challenge. Has its own, you know, complex challenges. They never get any easier. Each film I make, I don't know about my comrades here, but each film I make is the hardest thing I've ever attempted to do. And frankly, I wouldn't have it any other way. It's supposed to be like that. You know, I need to even like take a year off after each film just to forget how hard it is, because otherwise I might not do it again.
Like childbirth.
Yeah, there you go.
So actually, and what about Charlie's My Darling? I mean, it's like, was that this last push to get it finished? Was this, you know, was it difficult, or was all the difficult bits in the past?
Well, the last bits weren't too bad. Getting it up to the point where we realized we actually had a film, that was difficult. We had hours of stuff from cans that were unmarked. They were like 400-foot reels, no sound, no markings, nothing. We had to go in and lip read every frame to try and figure out what they were doing, and then go back and find recordings from that tour that would match up to their performances. So that was the daunting part.
So hold it. So the scenes where they're performing, were those shot MOS?
Yeah, there was an Agra, and then they would record off the board with a different type of recording system. But it was never filmed with the idea that they were doing a concert film. That wasn't even thought of in those days. There were no rockumentaries or anything like that. So this is one of the very first. I think Maisel did something with the Beatles when they came to town, but that also was just following them around.
What year was that again? I'm sorry.
65 for ours. Yes. And again, it was a practice session. So, but the amazing thing was finding out how accurate these guys were every night. Mick is 22 years old. Keith is 21. And these guys were total professionals. When they got on stage, they knew exactly what to do. They were still half a cover band at this point. They were figuring it out. So it's great that we have this stuff on film. It's amazing.
It is amazing. Although Keith already looks older than 21 in that movie.
It's a rough life.
Yeah. Philippe, in terms of what did Traviata teach you?
Well, it was the first time I was that long with the artists, and it was the first time we shared these 2 months of rehearsal. It's I guess it's a lesson of a theater lesson, because of Jean-François Sivalier, which very clever, and he's an actor himself, and he seems to, everything seems simple for him, and you feel directing actors, directing singers is very simple, but it's very, very difficult. He has this art that to make things simple. And question about the if I make comparison with what we, it seems simple for me. The life in Traviata, for shooting Traviata, was not that difficult, maybe compared to other experiences. But my problem is have to have the confidence of artists, and because there are, especially in music, I guess rock would be the same. I don't know if rock would be the same, but in classical music they are very shy. They don't want to show musical work in detail. The conductor, for example, was not very, at the beginning, was very shy about that, about the camera, about the sound. And as art is involved, as it's a matter of art, it's a matter of your skill, and you have to be to get the confidence of them. There's no way except sharing the most discreetly, the most quiet, all the time with them. You know?
Tom, what about you?
The primary thing I learned, I think, is how important casting directors were to a great casting director is to the collaborative process of a film. Before I started working on the film, I knew what a casting director did vaguely, but I really didn't understand how important they were to the process. So I would say that. And then, talking to these 200 people, it's almost not quantifiable how much I've learned about the process of casting and filmmaking.
Yeah, and how in the world do you, 200 people, how in the world do you get that narrowed down into a film?
Well, you throw out about 2/3 of them and then apologize later. And then you just always kind of have to stick to your core story and figure out when you can diverge from your core story and how it relates, all those divergent things, how they relate to the core story. What is your spine? And you always have to ask yourself that question. And it was a constant process over a year and a half of editing.
Antonio, what about you?
Well, for us there were many challenges. No, like we shot with non-professionals. It was a fiction film, and we kind of everyone recreated the roles. But in a way, all the limitations were, all the challenges. No, as many times you have to do. No, you kind of embrace them. And you think, oh, this at the end is good, is better. So in the end, all these limitations or these kind of issues were very embraced. While making the film, we really tried to create a very confident and very relaxed climate, so they will perform and be as natural or as relaxed as they could. And about this question of what you learn while making the film? Well, it's a constant learning because I saw the film as trying to create these memories, no? This stick, this is like if you rolled a negative, no? And you saw these images of family life, no? And making this, I felt very much related to my own life, no? Like making a film about a Mexican family distant in the mountains. I saw many things that I was very moved by because I shared many feelings, many hopes, dreams, like they had, no? So for me, even after I finish the film, I don't see it anymore, but I think about it, and there is always this invisible line that I have with the characters. It's but they're very personal, no? Very personal memories about I don't know, family, fatherhood, perhaps what's in a way important in life, although it seems very seamless, no? So for me, it was a reflection on perhaps on daily life and also on effort, no? The film is a lot about effort and opportunities, and so I mean many things, you know. It's for me it was a blessing to make the movie. There was also a lot of generous spirit in everything, so it was. I mean, I hope the other ones, if I make more films, are like this one.
Dheeraj, because I saw you were nodding. It's like, what spoke to you in terms of doing a story about Ullman and Bergman? You know, as they were saying, like, you know, a filmmaker who grew up in Bollywood. What was the thing that got you?
Well, I think really that the most interesting part about Leave's book or the films that Ingmar Bergman has made, the most interesting part is that this whole great actors, because Leave later came to the United States and became a superstar, and they've both had extraordinary. He was already very famous and had extraordinary careers and lives. But at the core and at the heart, it's a human story, and that is what intrigues me the most. It's for everyone. You don't have to know Leave Ullman or Ingmar Bergman. And people have, like, where people have seen this film, they have said this to us as well, that, you know, it doesn't matter whether we know their cinema or no, whether we know them personally or no. For us, what matters is that this film is about us. This is about anybody who has loved and lost and continued loving. And that is what really intrigued me, to answer your question, to make this film, because there is a passage in Changing where Leave says, after Ingmar confessed to her that not confessed, but told her that his mother had died, and cried and was very vulnerable, and she writes that, I knew in that moment that I could never leave him, and in a way never have. That is the film. Because in today's world, I see around, and everything is so self-centered, everything is so fragmented, especially in relationships. We are so, our defenses are always up. You know, we want to protect ourselves first. And in filming, doing this, found a letter from Ingmar Bergman where he says, now there's only one demand, and that is that you have to dare to love. Dare, my love, you know, dare to give, dare to receive. So I think that is what inspired me very, very much, that this is a story of how, like what Anthony said, what matters in the end. Because when you're 73 and the man you've loved is 20 years older than you, in the end, all this fame, all these awards, all this adulation doesn't matter. What matters is you have loved, and you were loved. So I think that's universal, and that's beautiful. That is inspiring.
Amen.
What about? I mean, a story like Chick Webb's. It's so obvious that there's dramatic potential in there. But what was the spark that drew you to him? What committed you to this project?
Well, I was on a discovering jazz. I'd been in the news business for a while, and I wanted to get back to music, and I discovered jazz and Charlie Christian, the great jazz guitarist, and Benny Goodman. And I was reading a biography of Benny Goodman, and I just came across like a paragraph of Chick Webb. And I just thought it was such an amazing underdog story. I wanted to find out more, and then I couldn't find out more. And that really sort of got my goat, and I didn't know why. And so that led to this long process of discovery, and first-person sources and photographs and footage that had never been seen before, and hopefully something that puts us back in that time.
Yeah, that must be really exciting when you stumble over something that looks absolutely awesome and you can't find, and Google can't help you.
Yes, it's called the Google Challenge. Not all life is there.
Okay, we want to take a couple of questions from the audience.
Wait for the microphone. Anyone have a question?
Hello, my name is Richard, and you have a question as well? Okay, and she has a question. I'm noticing that each one of your stories seems to have carved out a very important part of another craft or another aspect of art or part of the same art, which I think, or the same industry, that is telling the next step in a tale. And I can only connect to this specifically because as of recent, I just heard about Casting By recently, and I'm an actor and I've been in the industry for about a decade or so, and it's very interesting to see how all the different crafts develop within each other. But I noticed that casting directors are kind of like the people that are not recognized so much anymore. They're not given.
Well, not anymore. They never really were.
Interesting. I'm wondering if, for any of you, especially with Casting By, did you come to a point during the making of the film where you realized that you were sort of finding that place or fighting for a place in this time for that industry or that art to survive? I got a sense of it from when you were speaking about your cousin being a wordsmith, and when you were speaking about the opera singers. And especially in Casting By, I feel as if since the major networks have sort of dissolved as the controlling powers of casting films, casting directors are kind of left there unheard of, and now I feel as if your film has an opportunity to stake its mark in what's happening. Did you get that feeling while you were making that film, for any of you?
Well, I think I kind of realized I did have a responsibility now because I'm telling the story of an entire profession, and their story hadn't been told before. So they've really like come in and shown a lot of support for the film, and I think they're very excited about it getting out there into the cultural bloodstream to say, hey, here's what we do. And when I first interviewed Marion and I saw the amazing things she'd done, there was a sense of injustice that you feel like, wow, how come she is not lauded the way, Woody Allen, Martin Scorsese, the auteurs are lauded? And I didn't fully understand it, so I hope it's explored in the movie. Anyone else?
Yes, Tom, me. I am a casting director, and I've seen your film, and I think that you do a beautiful job just also capturing the real Marion, who I knew quite well.
Thank you.
And just the fact that she did make casting a profession. It wasn't really a profession. And it's, quite there are a lot of casting directors, and all your, people that live in other countries here, you also have wonderful casting directors in your own countries. But one of the things that I love about your movie is all the footage that you've got of the actors talking about their breaks, in the business. I was wondering how you were able to get all these people to talk about their first jobs, and I mean so openly and emotionally.
Well, first of all, getting the access to the actors was my producer, Kate Lacey, who was an executive at Disney for 7 years under that woman, actually, right there, Marcia Ross. And she was just a genius at being able to get everybody onto the film. Clint Eastwood took 2.5 years. Bette Midler took 3.5 years. Woody Allen took 4 days, but that was a process to get to that 4-day period. George Lucas took 3 days, is not in the film. I'm sorry, the question, I just lost my train of thought. Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, they were on camera because they wanted to tell their story. Jeff Bridges, we reached out to him. He actually called my cell phone and said, "What are you doing? How's Lynn?" They were very willing to tell their story. And once they got in front of the camera and started telling their story, they were passionate about it. They were going back to a time when they were a vulnerable, struggling unknown. John Voight, actually, Marion gave him his first break ever in front of a TV camera, and he failed miserably. And he very vulnerably tells that story. And I showed the clip of the TV show where he really didn't give a great performance, and he thought he would never work again. And Marion then thought he was the guy to play Joe Buck in Midnight Cowboy, and nobody else, or very few other people, believed that. And she really fought for him, and finally he became the lead in Midnight Cowboy and became a star because of that. So his love for Marion goes very, very deep, and he's one of many that when you watch the film, it's one after another, and again your jaw just drops open at all these people that are connected to this handful of people that you've never heard of before. It's fascinating.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I came in a little bit late, so I didn't catch your name. But yeah, so.
Alan?
Alan, yeah. So when you were talking about the film which you made about your cousin and about the fragility of memories and then whether he could relate to what he once was, it just, a film popped in my head, Alain René's Night and Fog, the film which he made about the Holocaust and how it's seen about 20 years after the Holocaust as a memory and how time affects memory in a sense. For a lot of people, maybe for René himself, I mean, it wasn't very personal in the sense that one of his relatives was affected by the Holocaust. But on a human level, it's still very personal, right? You know that something like this happened, and then so. And she asked you about how difficult is it to make a film about somebody who's very close to you, or how difficult is it to make a film about yourself? What do you think would the mental adjustments need to be if you made a film like Night and Fog after having made a film about your cousin? It's extremely hypothetical, but
well, I'm someone who likes to make films from the inside out. For instance, I made a film before this about insomnia, right? I've been a terrible sleeper, poor sleeper my whole life. And, I could have, there are many different strategies for making a film about a subject. I could have put an ad in the newspaper. I'm looking for bad sleepers. Would you like to be in a documentary film or a film about sleep and be a subject? Or I could have gone to doctors, and said, can I meet some of your patients and meet them, and then maybe I can follow them in the film. And then I realized that in the documentary genre, every film that you'll ever see, Chick Webb, what have you, it's about, or the Rolling Stones, it's about access, this word access. Every film is someone had access to a person, a place, inside information, the ability to follow someone or something over time, but people had access, special access. And I started to think, okay, I knew someone who had been a poor sleeper his whole life. He would let me bring a camera into his bedroom. His wife was okay with that too. He would give me access to his dreams. He was willing to make fun of himself. He would work with me as long as it took to make the film. He was a filmmaker, which I thought was really interesting. My point is, I didn't have to look outside, had to go. So that's what I do, There are people who can take big subjects and flip them, take universal subjects and flip them, But in the end, what I do is I want the screen to become a mirror, for you, the viewer, to experience the series of reflections and explorations that I'm making and cause you to, if necessary, shiver in your seat about the subject that, or obviously relate to the subject I'm referring to. It's funny, in my film, my cousin Edwin at one point looks into the camera and he sees his reflection, and he actually says, "I'm a mirror," you know? And at one point, I make a joke with him, where I'm playful with him. I say, "Mirror, mirror on the wall," and he says, "You be camera, and I'll be all." You know? So I'm someone whose work is always from the inside out. You know? I mean, I love Night and Fog and René's work and so forth, but that's how I do it. You know?
Yeah, I have a question for you as well, because I think a lot, well, me and I know a lot of other people who are this period of life when you lose your memory and get old, have fear of that, like how am I going to be if I'm old or lose my memory? And my question is, did you learn to sort of maybe lose this kind of fear? What kind of, how do you say that? What did you learn in terms of maybe thinking of when we all get old and lose our memories? What would you think can make us lose that fear and maybe change then to live our lives differently in order to accept maybe that period of life better?
I can't give you an easy answer to that question, because the thought of losing my memory scares the hell out of me. And as I'm sure it does for everyone here, I mean, memory is the glue of life. It's the glue of life. There's no other way of saying it. Memory is allows us to move fluidly from the past, from the present, from past, present, through past, present, and future. It allows us to move through time. You lose your memory, you can no longer do that. So memory is both the glue of life. If you lose it, it's the scissor of life, you know? And as I mentioned before, my father lost his memory, and his father lost his memory. So if you do the math, I have sort of slight reason to believe that that might be the ticket in the male line of my family. So it's something that concerns me a great deal, you know? But, you know, my cousin Edwin experienced what I like to think of as a poet's Alzheimer's, you know? And what it made me actually believe in is that if you feed someone who's losing their memory, when I say feed them, if you encourage them and inspire them to, in ways that are of their strength and who they are, who they were, you can sustain a kind of energy and sustain a kind of spirit that I found to be true with my cousin. Other than that, it's unbelievably frightening. And I don't think there's any easy answer, you know. Yeah, there, but for the grace of God go all of us, really, you know.
Our time is up, and I want to thank the filmmakers for being here, and thank you guys, and hope you enjoy the films. Thank you.
Thank you.